The Rand is slightly firmer today ahead of the U.S. Fed rate decision and after local inflation edged to 7.0% in February. Market focus will be on the Fed's policy meeting, which will end later in the day, with investors awaiting clarity on the path the U.S. Central Bank could take in the wake of a global banking turmoil. Viv Govender is the portfolio manager at Rand Swiss. He joins us now for the very latest market moves. Viv, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Let's start with an overview of how local trade is faring so far today.
Yes, we are looking a bit stronger right now, and that is ahead of, like you mentioned, the U.S. Fed announcement later today. Expectations for the Fed announcement are a quarter percent increase, a 25 basis point increase. If you look at where things were just before the SVB and other banking crises like Credit Suisse and First Republic and so on, expectations were more for a quarter to a half increase, but now it's between 0 and a quarter. And the only reason people think it's not going to be zero is not because they don't think it's justified to be zero. It's because they don't think the Fed wants to spook the market into thinking that the problem is bigger than the market currently knows. If it comes in at half, the market may believe that there's more problems in the market than is currently been out in the market, and therefore it might just cause a bit of a panic. So that's the only reason that I think that they're not going to do 0%, which they might want to do at this current budget time.
Yeah, can we characterize it as a global banking crisis?
Almost certainly. I mean, it's some of the biggest banks, all the biggest banks in Europe and one of the biggest banks in the world, Credit Suisse. Smaller banks in the US, but we're talking, top 50 and top 20 size banks. You know what I mean? They are pretty large banks. We're talking, hundreds of billions of dollars basically involved in these banks that are under pressure at the moment. The US has about 4 banks that are, up on a different level, different tier than the other banks. But the second tier banks, these are some of the largest second tier banks out there in the US. So yeah, it's a global banking crisis. We haven't seen much happening in Africa and other parts of the world. But the one thing that worries me is the fact that the US, the European Union and the S&P, the Swiss National Bank, they all print hard currencies, currencies that the world thinks is valuable. They can borrow money in their currencies. If this occurs in a part of the world where you can't actually borrow in your own currency as the government, therefore you don't have the effectively ability to print a hard currency, the ability of the government to backstop a bank like this would be much more difficult.
Okay, let's come back home. Inflation is up for the first time in 4 months. Talk us through the data and what clues it gives us about next week's MPC decision.
Yeah, look, high inflation, not just for us, by the way, but also for the UK also. I think this is the worst miss the UK had in about 13 or 14 years. It's about 2010, 2009. So this is a pretty big miss on their part, and it's well over 10%. We're expecting under 10%. In us as well, we've also seen an uptick in inflation. And the scary thing for us in South Africa, because we have a different demographic situation than, say, for instance, the UK, is that food inflation and transport inflation are the two big drivers here. We're talking about food inflation well over 10%, transport inflation almost 10%. And that, I think, is quite troublesome. If you think about just the basket of expenditure among people in South Africa, the lower income groups are likely to spend much more on food and on transport than the upper income groups. And that means that, this inflation is quite bad, but it's also going to be affecting the poorer people in the country more than the wealthier.
BP Southern Africa has taken the decision to exit operations at OR Tambo International Airport and is currently serving notice to cease being a managing participant effective 1 May this year. Talk us through the developments and what it means for South Africa's jet fuel supplies moving forward.
It's obviously not good to have a big player like this pull out. I think there's a rumor, but it's not confirmed by BP, that this might have to do with South Africa's ties with Russia. Remember, with all the stuff around the Russian sanctions and so on, as an operator from Europe or from North America, you really don't want to be involved in anything that might link you to a Russian operation. So this is a Russian plane lands or something that might be a problem for them. Like I said, BP has not confirmed or denied this, but that's one possibility that's going on. That's one of the reasons that they're looking to basically pull out. They don't want to be involved in any kind of operations that might link them to Russia and therefore cause troubles for them in their home countries.
Sheesh. Okay. Normalized earnings of Outsurance jumped at more than 3/4. Earnings jumped to 1.32 billion rand. Help us make sense of that performance.
Yeah, look, I mean, they also got rid of the stake in Discovery, Momentum. Sold some of the stuff in Hastings Group. So there's a bit of a targeting of their operations. Interesting enough, Outsurance, we think of it as a South African company. It is a South African company, but they've done really well overseas. If you look at their operations, for instance, in Australia, which is one of their biggest operations at the moment in terms of revenue, in terms of earnings, something coming through. It really is, a big player for them. And now they're looking to Ireland as well, which would be, I think, their third market. So they are looking at expanding globally. It's an interesting thing that, some of our, our telecoms and our insurance businesses really do well overseas, which is quite interesting.
Before we let you go, are you aware of the 99 Rand scam trial that is going to be taking place in September? A UK citizen accused, or allegedly, he took part in this in terms of scamming bank customers. So that 99 Rand that goes off, and you have to fill in so many forms just to get less than 100 Rand bank from your bank. What does it tell you, especially in terms of our regulatory space in the country?
Yeah, look, I personally have had experience, not the 99 Rand scam, but I've had experiences recently where, unknown parties are debiting my account, and I had to go and talk to the bank about it. And the bank charges you money. It's not a lot of money. It's like R5 or something to basically stop it and reverse these debit orders. But, they don't really check up on it. And then you ask them, are they going to do anything about the people that did this? They said, no, you've got to go into a branch and actually file a report on this. You can't just do it on the phone. So you have to take time out of your day, go into the branch, file a report on something. You pay money for somebody else's basically scam, and they carry on doing what they're doing. In my case, it was some legal subscription service where you pay us I think 100 rands a month, and they give you legal services, which I never signed up for and I never did anything about. Even recently I've had issues with stuff like that. I think Telkom also had issues like that. The problem right now is that there's no punishment, or not enough punishment, for misbehaving, even ethical or not ethical, but legitimate companies that do this. We might have an unethical employee putting stuff through. You might have whatever happening, but as a customer, there is very little recourse to you without taking a lot of time, a lot of effort to go out and actually rectify it. And most people are just going to say, okay, pay the R5 and forget about it, or cancel the debit order and make sure it's blocked again. But it's something I think that is really systematically wrong in South African banks at the moment.
It may seem insignificant, but actually if you don't have R5, you can't get a loaf of bread. And so what needs to happen to protect customers in South Africa by banks? Do they need to do better, no?
Yes, I think there should be a whole line where if you basically are accused of something like this here, your bank accounts are basically unable to do a debit order until, it's investigated. There needs to be free from, as a cost to customers for a debit order. If the bank cannot prove it and the debitor cannot prove that you basically did this debit order, it should be free of charge for you to be reversed. The fact that you have to be charged for it is ridiculous. And I think the reporting has to be, you should be able to, if you call in and are able to cancel the order, you should actually be able to report the company, via the same phone call. The fact that you have to go into a branch and do this, I don't know if it's every company. I know my bank basically maybe going to a branch. I wasn't, willing to go and spend a couple hours on this here, but it's something that I think if they made it easier to report them, made the penalties for being fraudulent more difficult, and made it criminal as well. If somebody comes and takes 100 rands from your wallet or your purse or whatever, that's a crime. The fact that they do it with using the banking system is no less of a crime. And the fact of that is that they should be reported as criminals, and there should be police action against them. Some of these guys are known companies. Their premises, arrest the CEO, even if it's a few thousand rands. Arrest the CEO for the crime that they've committed.
Very quickly for us, the electricity minister is making all the right noises, saying the energy availability factor is on an upward trajectory. Do the markets actually look out for anything where this is concerned? This is a new portfolio created to take the country out of the dark, if you will.
Yeah, look, I remember they did announce something like this back in January, that we'd be up a bit by end of March, and we'd be better by next year and the year after. If they can halt the drop, that'll be, I think, very important. They have not been able to halt the drop as yet. It's been worse every year. Yes, we had a bit of a break over the last couple of days. Remember, we had that, I don't know how successful, depending on the media source you're talking to, that shutdown was on Monday. But yesterday was a public holiday, so we had effectively a long weekend. And yes, they got down to zero for a couple of hours, which is good. But we're back to 3 now this afternoon.